Hello everybody, what's going on? This is Andrew, and today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to be talking a lot about Magic, not playing any Magic. I'm going to talk a little bit about Pioneer today. For those of you who don't know, Pioneer was a format introduced by Wizards in fall 2019. It was supposed to be like the midpoint Premier Play format, somewhere between Modern and Standard. It included cards from Return to Ravnica all the way to present, and people were excited about this format. I am thinking a lot about Pioneer, thinking about getting back and playing paper events again, and I had a lot of fun playing Pioneer when I was preparing for the events back before everything that we've been through over the last few years. So I thought it could be fun to make a video talking about Pioneer's history, what happened at the last Premier Play event before everything shut down in 2020, and then talk about why I want to play Pioneer now and what I'm thinking about for that. So if you go back with me to February of 2020, there was a Grand Prix and Players Tour, the Pro Tour equivalent, happening in the same venue at the same weekend in Phoenix, Arizona. You could show up to the event on Friday, I think it was, and try to last minute qualify for the PT the next day. And then if you didn't do that, you could play in the GP. I went down with a couple friends, and we had a blast playing Pioneer and hanging out at the Grand Prix. And little did we know it would be the last event that we'd go to for a while. I played Blue-White Control all weekend. I was actually one game win away from spiking a Pro Tour qualifier on Friday and qualifying for the PT the next day. I went 4-0 over the course of a single elimination PTQ, and then was 1-1 in the finals against a Sultai Uro deck, and then lost the last game and did not qualify, and then didn't even day 2 the GP. Which sucks, but, you know, life goes on. It's fine. But other top decks from that weekend, so like I mentioned, there was Blue-White Control was a really popular deck. I had spent a lot of time tuning and learning how to play the deck. At the time, you could play Teferi Time Raveler, so you could pair that with Teferi Hero of Dominaria and Dream Trawler, and you would just control people out of the game and eventually win with Teferi and Castle Ardenvale tokens. Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, had been printed not too long before this event. People were figuring out that it was extremely powerful, and they were playing it in like a rock mid-range control style deck, paired with black mana for Thoughtseize and other removal spells, and you would just control and grind your opponent out of resources and then flashback Uro and win the game. But the breakout decks from the format were really a blue-black Inverter of Truth deck. Now, if you don't remember Inverter of Truth, I don't blame you. It was a Eldrazi from Oath of the Gatewatch that turned your graveyard into your library and exiled your library. So if you only had like 3 cards in your graveyard, that turned into your library and your library went away. Well, this was paired with Thassa's Oracle, which is a card that was printed in the same set Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath, was printed in. And you would just combo kill your opponent. You would just be a blue-black control deck, do a couple control-y things. Then you'd cast a Dig Through Time to delve away cards out of your graveyard. Then when you had 6 mana, you'd play Inverter of Truth, make your graveyard basically nothing, or make your deck basically nothing because your graveyard was nothing, and then play Thassa's Oracle and win the game on the spot. It was a super fun combo. I'm kidding. I hated playing against the deck, but it was one of the breakout decks from the weekend. And the other one was a Lotus Field combo deck with Underworld Breach, another powerful card from Theros Beyond Death, which would let you kind of combo off by using resources in your graveyard to continually untap Lotus Field to generate a bunch of mana and eventually kill your opponent in any number of ways. There were aggro decks. Mono Black and Mono Red had decent aggro decks show up at over the course of the weekend. And then Bant Spirits was also around. Spell Queller, Rattle Chain, Selfless Spirit, all kind of strung together with Collected Company at the 4 slot. was a really powerful, really annoying tempo aggro deck. So this event happened, and everybody was loving Pioneer. And then March of 2020 happens, and Pioneer kind of slowly loses its steam. People were still playing it online a little bit, but of course, there weren't any in-person events. All the events that had been scheduled all year to kind of promote Pioneer and get people into Pioneer had to be canceled. And then I kind of lost interest in Pioneer. I don't really invest a lot on Magic Online. I didn't want to. Arena was here, and it seemed like Arena was the thing if you wanted to be investing in to put your time into Arena, not Magic Online, so that's what I did. But I'm getting a little bored of Arena. I'm getting tired of it. And I think a lot of people are feeling similar ways, especially with some recent issues that the Arena economy has, or I guess the issues have always been there, but the recent announcements by Wizards don't give us hope that they're going to make any massive changes. So I'm thinking about Pioneer a little bit more. And then I saw this article, which I've got on the screen right now, saying that there's all access events happening soon on Magic Online. So for $25, you can get access to a token, which lets you enter any event for that $25 and gives you access to basically any card on Magic Online. If you use 2 of those tokens, you can enter one of these Pro Tour qualifiers. So for $50, you can enter an event that's normally a $40 event. These super qualifiers have a $40 entry fee. And you get access to any card. So this got me thinking, maybe I should check back in on Pioneer and check out this Pioneer super qualifier. And so that's what I'm doing. That's the whole point of why I'm here talking about Pioneer, is because I want to check in on the format, and I think I'm going to play in this event, this super qualifier. It's only $10 more than it normally would be, and I get access to any card, so I don't have to buy into the format. So I wanted to look at Pioneer and what decks are good and what decks aren't good, and go from there. So looking at the Pioneer Challenge from March 14th, which is the most recent long event like this as of time of recording. This event was won by Daniel Akos playing a Blue-Red Phoenix deck. So if you've played Blue-Red Phoenix in Historic, this deck should be very familiar to you. It uses a combination of Arc-Light Phoenix and Thing in the Ice and then a bunch of spells. And you just cast all your spells, and eventually you bring back your birds or you flip your thing and you win the game. It's a very straightforward deck. The deck was in Standard for a bit and it did the same thing. This deck's been in Historic and competitive in Historic for as long as Historic's existed. That's what this deck does. This deck won the event. If we look at the other decks that were in the top 8, there were 3 red aggro decks. There was another Blue-Red Phoenix deck. There was a Naya Winota deck, which is a new archetype because Winota hadn't been printed yet. There's a new Lotus Field combo deck, so even though parts of that original Lotus Field combo deck had been banned, there's still ways to combo off with your Lotus Fields, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then there's a 5-color Niv-Mizzet deck, which is very similar to the Historic version of the deck. So we're going to go through a couple lists. I'm going to talk about what decks I like, what decks I don't like, and then I'm going to talk about what my plan is, basically. So like I said, Phoenix, this is what this deck is. It's very straightforward. It's even got a Temporal Trespass to take an extra turn to just win the game out of nowhere sometimes. It's got powerful refuel cards like Expressive Iteration and Pieces of the Puzzle, and Treasure Cruise to go along with all of your cheap artifacts like Consider and Opt. And you're just going through your deck just like the Historic version of the deck, just like the old Standard versions of the deck. Sideboard, you get Young Pyromancer, you get some Narsets, but your main goal doesn't change very much. You want to cast 3 mana flyers or 0/4s and then kill your opponent over the course of just a few turns. Next, I've got the second place deck here, the Naya Winota deck. So this deck, like I said, did not exist, or I haven't seen this deck because Winota was printed in Ikoria. So Winota Join Our Forces says that whenever a non-human creature attacks, you get to look at the top 6 cards of your deck and put a human onto the battlefield, tapping and attacking, and that human gains indestructible until end of turn. So with these decks, you usually want to play mana dorks or cheap non-humans, and then expensive humans that you can find with Winota's ability. This deck plays Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves and Prosperous Innkeeper and Selfless Spirit to be those cheap non-human creatures. And then it uses Kenrith, Brutal Cathar, Blade Historian, and Tovolar's Huntmaster to be the big humans defined off of your Winota hits. It's a very punishing, aggressive, combo-y kind of deck. If you can't find Winota, it still has a backup plan that's decent. It's not as straightforward as other backup plans in regular aggro decks, but you know, sometimes you just need a beatdown plan. It's going to be good enough some of the time, and the combo potential is huge for this deck. Out of the sideboard, you get Elite Spellbinders to help with control. You get Scavenging Oozes, Rending Volleys, and Skyclip Apparitions, all really powerful cards when attacking either creature decks or more control-y builds. This deck is sweet. Next, we have a red-white aggro deck. So there's 2 mono-red decks that are very, very similar that I'll get to in just a minute. But this deck finished higher in the event, so I want to talk about this one first. This deck gives up some of the mono-red things, so it can play Boros Charm and sideboard Chain to the Rocks. So Boros Charm is very powerful in Modern Burn. It's just huge damage. Sometimes it gives a key creature indestructible. It's a really powerful card. Otherwise, this deck it's a mono-red aggro deck, right? You've got your Bone Crusher Giants, your Eidolon of the Great Revels, your Swift Spears, your Soul Scarred Mages, and Voldaren Epicure making an appearance here. You've got your Light Up the Stages to go with your Epicure, which is cute, right? For 2 mana, you can play Epicure, get the trigger, and then light up the stage. Skewer the Critics is also pretty easy to turn on here. Otherwise, it's just a pretty straightforward aggro deck. And like I said, you get access to Chain to the Rocks, which is a really efficient white removal spell out of the sideboard by dipping into white here. I wouldn't think that skewing your mana base like this just for Chain to the Rocks and Boros Charm is good, but it worked for this player, and they finished 3rd in the event. So you know, gotta give them props where props are due. Curse of Shaken Faith is one I want to look at here too. It's a curse, so you put it on your opponent, and if they cast a second spell on a turn, it does damage to them. So against like Phoenix players, cursing them when all they have is cheap spells that they want to cast as many times as possible in a turn is a way to just push more damage, because you just really want to race them and kill them before they get set up. And then there were 2 players in this top 8 that played, like I said, pretty identical mono red lists, featuring 4 Chandra Dressed to Kill, Bone Crusher, Eidolon, Swift Spear, Soulscar Mage, 4 Light Up the Stages, 4 Skewer the Critics, some burn spells, and then Kumano faces Kakazan as the 20th, or as the last 4 creatures to bring the creature count up to 20, which is about what you see in these mono red aggro decks. This powerful saga from the most recent set deals damage to them, makes your next creature better, and is a 2/2 haste. It kind of does everything that the deck wants to do. Chandra and Kumano faces Kakazan both go really well with Light Up the Stage and Skewer the Critics. And then in the sideboard, or in the land base, you have Den of the Bugbears, Reminap Ruins, Mountains, and a Sokenzan, all of which are really great to play with. You get to play with, 9 utility lands in your mono red aggro deck, so you're only playing with 11 cards in the 60 card deck that don't do something else, which is really, really good. In the sideboard, you get Chandra Torch of Defiance, you get a Mutavault just for extra utility out of your lands, Roiling Vortexes, Lava Coils to kill Thing in the Ices, and then Cemetery Gatekeeper to put pressure on your slower opponents as well. I really like how this deck is built. This would be my choice for going into the format. I played a little bit with the mono red deck in some side events at that GP 2 years ago, the deck has changed a little bit, but I think it's only gotten better from the version I played, and I'd be very interested to play with a deck like this. Then there was a Lotus Field player. I am not a combo player. I don't... This is not my bread and butter, if you want to call it that. But what this deck is trying to do is get Lotus Fields, put them into play, and then tap and untap them enough to eventually cast either Emergent Ultimatum or Omniscience. And then eventually you win the game with what, Approach of the Second Sun, it looks like. These combo decks are popular, and you need to know how they work and what cards are important to them. This deck gets to play Sylvan Scrying, Shimmer of Possibility, and Vizier of Tumbling Sands to find your Lotus Fields and then to tap and untap them. So the Viziers can untap lands and net you mana. The Hidden Strings can untap your lands and net you mana, and the Pour Over the Pages can do the same thing. So it's pretty easy to generate lots of mana in this deck out of nowhere. They only need a few turns to set up, and then they're killing you out of nowhere. With this deck, it plays 4 Thespian stages. The way Lotus Field is worded, you only need to sacrifice lands when it comes into play. So if you play Thespian stage and then copy it, the Thespian stage is already in play. You don't need to sacrifice more lands there. So that's another way to make a lot of fast mana with this deck. A friend lent me this deck, and I played around with it a little bit at one of the events I went to. I won some with it, but it's not my style of deck, and it's not a deck I would look to play personally. But for all you combo players out there, this is the deck you want to be playing. And then last but certainly not least is a Niv Mizzet Reborn mid-range deck. This deck should look pretty similar to the historic versions of the deck. The notable difference is that this deck gets to play Bring to Light as a way to go and get whatever specific card you need, so you can play more one-ofs in a deck like this. So you've got your 3 Niv Mizzet Reborns, which come into play and can draw you a card for each 2-color pair that exists, which is why you see so many one-ofs also. But then it also plays 4 Bring to Lights, and the Bring to Light lets you search your deck for any card with mana value less than or equal to the number of colors used to cast Bring to Light. It's a 5 mana spell, so if you spend 5 different types of mana, you can go get your Niv Mizzet, and then it just comes into play and you move on with your life. But if you need a sweeper, you can go get one of your sweepers. If you need Yasharn because your opponent is playing a sacrifice deck, you can go get your Yasharn. You can get your Tolsimir, which gains you a bunch of life and clogs the board. This deck is slow to set up, but once it gets going, is a really powerful mid-range engine, and it's got the support for it. This version of the deck isn't playing as many sweepers as I would expect a deck like this to play. I would expect more Deafening Clarions, but I don't see any, which is kind of interesting. I would love to learn how to play a deck like this. I think that it's not a choice I would make for just entering the format. But if I were trying to invest some time into the format, I would love to work on a deck like this. I think this deck is a lot of fun, and I would really enjoy playing a deck like this. Looking through the rest of the top 16 of this event, there's not too much else to make note of, more repeat copies of the same decks. Until you get to 15th place. 15th place has a mono black aggro deck that plays a bunch of 1-mana 2/1s, Thoughtseizes, cheap removal, and just efficient black creatures. And then 16th place has a red-black deck that leans into the discard aspect. Not really decks I felt the need to highlight, but I did want to call out that there are more other aggro decks you could play if one of these aggro decks doesn't catch your eye. All that being said, the mono red deck is probably what I would look to play here. I love playing good, efficient mono red decks that have enough aggressiveness to them and have enough stuff to do if they start flooding a little bit, and these decks do, with 4 copies of Light Up the Stage, Bone Crusher Giant, and so much utility in your lands. It's really hard to miss. And then you get to bring in your Chandra Torches of Defiance, which is one of the most powerful cards ever printed. I would probably find a way to slide a Glorybringer into the sideboard because I love that card so much, even though it's not maybe in the best place, but I just love that card so much. And that's where Pioneer is at right now. There's not a control deck as far as I can tell. The 5-color Niv deck is probably as close to a control deck as I've seen in the deck dumps recently. I'm sure there is a blue-white control deck, but I don't know how good it is against the field. So while I'd want to keep my eye open for it, it's not something I would want to bring to an event today or next week. Instead, I'm gonna do some research on mono red aggro and see if I can figure out how to play a deck like this. And my plan is to play it in that event coming up soon. If all goes well, I'm going to record myself playing all of the rounds I make it through and post it as a special thing. We'll see how that goes. I'm excited to play Pioneer again. That's the main thing. I think this format is in a sweet spot. It's powerful, but not too powerful. It can do some broken things, but it's not so much that you feel like terrible playing the format. Yeah, I want to see this format succeed, and I'm excited to start supporting it again now that things are starting to open up again. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So thanks for listening to my rant. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Try Pioneer, I guess, is the TLDR of this video. The top 8 looks pretty diverse from the most recent online challenge, and we'll see if it continues to look like a good, healthy format at the conclusion of these qualifiers that we're working up towards. Thank you again so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you next time.